Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Front Row Material. I am your host, Mike Freland. Hope you are doing well. Thank you so much for joining us yet again on a Tuesday night. I got a big show for you lined up this week. We're going to be talking about all the crazy news that's been going on in wrestling with our panel coming up in our second hour. But in our first hour, we got something very, very interesting. We have an individual who's got, I think, a very fascinating story. It is someone who works at the Wrestling Observer, and it is one of my favorite publications. It's a go-to for me whenever I want to find out what's going on in wrestling. So Derek from the Wrestling Observer is with us. Derek, how you doing, buddy? And thanks for joining us.
Doing good. Thanks for having me, Mike.
So let me just kind of first jump right into it here. So how did your fascination of wrestling actually had to start? I mean, it's got to have some incarnation here. So how did that happen?
My dad used to watch ESPN, and this is how old and young I am at the same time. Austin Idol and Jerry Lawler were in a cage match from Memphis, and it was on ESPN, and instantly fell fascinated. And it is the biggest memory of professional wrestling when I was 2 or 3 years old. And growing up as a kid, you didn't have 85 channels to choose from. You had 7 channels to choose from, and wrestling was on every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern or 12 o'clock. It was Superstars. And living in the Philadelphia area, there was a lot of content between Crockett running in the Philadelphia area and having TV in the Philadelphia area, and it really being a stronghold for Spectrum and Prism and Vince for a long time. It really just it was easy to be saturated with content, and being that young and seeing athleticism and larger than life characters, it's very hard not to get hooked at that age, and has continued at this point forward. Now, let's see, I'm 36. Yeah, 36. So over 30 years of wrestling, which is crazy to kind of verbally say, let alone mentally realize.
It's a lot. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because wrestling for so many people is something that they either watched with, I hear responses from their grandparents to their older siblings, to their father. It's something that just kind of became entrenched in them. It was kind of a family thing, and something that a lot of families end up having, like this ritual. And it's something that gets passed on. I think that's really, really cool. Early on, was there anybody that you specifically gravitated to, or?
I mean, the Hulk Hogan to Ultimate Warriors, Sting. My devotion never really got to having all the posters of one guy and really being a fan of someone in particular. I always, once I got past being 5 or 6, the tag teams were a big part. Big fan of Road Warriors, the Nasty Boys at the time, and like it was hard not to enjoy them because it was different. I didn't really watch a lot of the pay-per-views, so there were a ton of always tag team squashes. So the Rockers were heavily part of that. I always think about Earthquake and Typhoon and the natural disasters. And especially being that age, action figures, it was always cool to get 2 compared to 1. So I always gravitated towards tag teams. But really, until ECW came around, there was nobody, I know the categorization now is going to be a mark for, but there was no one I was really a mark for until Raven. And Raven was someone that was different and cutting edge and just appealed differently than what I was seeing on TV a lot of that time. So Raven was the first one I was really, went out of my way to make sure I tuned in and watched, but he was the first one I was really a hardcore mark for.
Did you ever think about, I know a lot of people who turned out to be wrestling fans, after the fact. Were you wanting to get into wrestling at some point in time, or did you ever have a desire to be a part of wrestling when you were early on, or was that something that you were like, I enjoy watching it, but never really gave it much thought about being a part of the industry itself?
Getting into the industry was a whole lot different than wanting to be it. I don't know that I ever really wanted to. Growing up in the area of Philadelphia and around Philadelphia, there was always a ton of indies being run. So when I first started going to comments on wrestling, I never assumed I would be able to get into the business. And then it just kind of, you're there at a show, you're setting up chairs, you're doing whatever you can to make it feel like you're part of it. And then as they bring you in, you kind of just feel like you're in. And at that point in time, I never assumed wanted to be a wrestler. I was a tall, skinny kid growing up. I was never built to be a professional wrestler, but I was writing for wrestling websites at that time and building websites when HTML was basic compared to the shit that goes on today, with God knows how many layers of code and everything like that. I could build a very basic HTML website, writing for websites, sending reports into like One Wrestling and Meltzer and, those various websites. Never thought I would want to be in it. I was more in tune in wanting to be apart from the outside. But once you get in, it's very hard to get out. As over now 18 years involved in wrestling has taught me, it's in, Roddy Piper used to say all the time, once it's in your blood, it's in your blood. I never thought at being 36, I would be a partial career at this point in professional wrestling. And it's just crazy to look back and see it now, especially from the differences between the business then and now.
So what age were you when you started doing kind of the web building and whatnot? Give me a time frame range of when that was actually happening.
I was 15, so
Wow.
that would be 2000. So I was doing, writing TV recaps for various websites. And then I sent one into ECWWrestling.com as like hey, by the way, I'm doing these. They edited it to all hell, but posted it because I guess whoever was doing it that week was off. And I got some notoriety from it and kind of grew from there. Before social media, before Twitter, before Facebook. And then we would go to the comments on wrestling shows, me and my friends. And then I've always been a networker. So I would find the guys' AOL Instant Messenger names and hit them up, be like, do you need a website? And I'll provide it for free or charge you $20 a month. And you just send me the stuff you want to post and I'll post it for you. And it's really how it started.
Wow. So obviously getting involved with the Wrestling Observer was something, it was just the natural progression of everything that you were doing at that time.
So I would always send, I would go to house shows, I would go to indie shows, I would send them to Dave. And growing up in this business and being part of the younger talent and CZW and Chikara and Ring of Honor and being trained and being part of them, I was able to get some information that I'd be able to pass to Dave and back and forth. So I don't want to say I started as a source with Dave, but kind of. I would just reach out to Dave occasionally and just be like, I read the newsletter, been a subscriber for God knows how long. There are typos there, and Dave has always claimed that he's not the best typer, and I can assure you he's not. But when it comes to spelling, grammatical, he didn't really have anyone that was doing it for him. And he lives on the West Coast. So who's going to be able to stay up that late and be able to do it? And also has a knowledge of the business. And I pestered him for a really long time until he finally said, yeah, I could use somebody. And that's been 6 years now. So the nights of the Observer are the longest nights, what feels like, of my life, because proofreading and editing 40,000 words in a very short time span is not fun, but I enjoy it still, and keeps me in tune to wrestling and what's going on. And the expansion of this business digitally is something it's pretty cool to be a part of, to see how Dave has taken his legitimate print newsletter to the next level online.
Let me ask you, there's a lot of critics, and there's a lot of wrestling critics and people out there. Do you feel like Dave gets a bad rap?
Politically, yes. The non-political answer is there are people that don't like his opinions. There are people that don't like the way he spins his opinions in his reports. People take it as fact, or they want to dispute his opinion, and then it gets messy. So I've always thought reading Dave is you can decipher what is an opinion and what is reporting. And if you cannot do that, you're either searching for it or hoping that what is coming out of his brain ends up being fact. There are a lot of people in this business that sit there and read the Observer and use it as lessons, and they should. Dave's been around for God knows how long and will continue to be around for God knows how long. He's one of the smartest guys when it comes to the business. If you doubt that, then you just disagree with the opinions that are being put forth. But I don't think anybody works as hard, cultivates information. The whole thing with Cody Rhodes in the last couple of days and all that. I saw someone tweet today that Dave was late to the story and is out of touch. I know for a fact he wasn't, but it's not my place to sit there and point fingers and say this guy was first and that guy was second. I think there's a different level with Dave who likes to get the whole story and not just the here's 4 lines, here's what's going on right now, more later. I think he likes to do a more complete follow through of everything going on compared to the breaking news synopsis that a lot of what goes on. And I think that's in news in general, not just in professional wrestling. You know, you look at Adam Schefter when he tweets something out, it's not a news story that or a link he's sending. It's just 240 characters of here's what's going on. And then the story comes later. That's what it is now. I don't think Dave wants to do that. I don't think Dave needs to be first, but I don't think there's anyone more thorough than Dave. It's okay not being first, but when you provide the most, I think that means more, and that's just me personally. The bad rap he gets, it's not jealousy, it's not that. It's just some of it's a gimmick, and some of it just ends up being I disagree with his opinion, or he shit on me at one point in time, and I don't know how to take criticism.
Right. Who would you say, in your opinion, is in that category of where the Wrestling Observer is as far as what, Dave does? Do you feel like there's any other really good, credible sources out there as well? Or do you feel like it's such a hard thing to say because everybody wants to claim they're well-connected?
I don't think there's, in terms of level of connection, I think there's people that have similar connections to Dave. I think Sean Ross Sapp does a very good job in what he does. Wade Keller does a great job in what he does. I think there's a different form of reporting out there. I think Dave and Wade are the long form reporters. I think Sean is, I don't subscribe to Sean, so I don't know everything that he posts other than what I see on Twitter.
Sure.
I think he's very good at what he does and getting the news out there quickly. And I think in this day and age, that's important. I don't think it's everything. Look, everybody gets a story wrong. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does at some point in time. There have been people that I've disagreed with, seen them write a story that I know it's not true, and it's how they handle it. Some are better than others. Some take criticism well, some don't. It's hard to differentiate what is reporting and what is speculation anymore as well. Listen, working at AdFreeShows.com and doing research for Bruce Pritchard and Conrad and Bischoff and everybody, they always say he wasn't there, or, how does he really know that? It's all the same news that comes out from every other source of every other form of broadcasting. Roger Goodell hears about an owner's leak from one of their meetings. I guarantee you 95% of what is said is true at that point in time. Just sometimes you don't want to hear it, and sometimes you don't want to take the basis of reality with fact. And like I said, some of it's gimmick, some of it's not. But it's hard not to think Mike Johnson, especially on the Indies and in the Northeast, is very well connected. These are the guys that when they say something, it means something. And when they report something, it means something. Those guys are hard to separate when it comes to being connected and being up there with knowledge and news.
Would you say in this day and age, a lot of things are much more held quiet unless you have not necessarily a reputable name, but it's harder for people nowadays to break into wrestling news as far as from a coverage standpoint. just for the simple fact that there's just so few people that either wrestlers or promoters truly trust, or do you think it's just as the same level of difficulty as it was when you first broke in?
I think it's easier now to break in than it was then, because now there's more ability to get clout, followers, and page clicks and things like that. You know, there wasn't media scrums 25, 30 years ago. There wasn't media scrums 5 years ago. You know, Dave would constantly talk about in the past. I'd call the office and ask them for a comment. I didn't ask for confirmation. I asked for a comment. There were times that people would sit there and refute and refute and refute. And 2 days later, they would announce it. So there's the medium has changed. The ability to communicate changed. You talk about Dave being on the West Coast and WWE being on the East Coast. You know, there were times that he'd have to get up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast to get a 9 a.m. phone call over to J.J. Dillon to confirm something he heard the night before at 2 a.m. So the world's gotten smaller. The ability to gather information's gotten easier. Is it easier? I think Dave has a very much easier time getting information than ever before. But I think the amount of falsehoods that he's been given recently is way different than what he used to get 20, 30 years ago. It was easy to do. You know, Jeff talks about it all the time on his podcast about how Dave would get reports and the finishes would be wrong, and the one guy, and he would report that the wrong guy won when the other guy won. It's so much easier to verify that stuff now than ever before. So in the ability to get easier into the business and report news, there's a lot of people out there that can report whatever they want, and then sometimes they get it right. It's, you know, Kevin Owens cut a promo about hating the state of Texas. It's not really hard to figure out who Austin's going to be working at WrestleMania. Not all of it's reporting. Some of it's stars aligning and being able to read the tea leaves. But if you know that Cody Rhodes' contract has expired, it's going to be that information gets out a whole lot easier now than ever before, because the other end of this conversation ends up being they want a favor at some point in time, or clout, or a put over. Not that I'm saying it happens, but we know it happens. So it's easier to get information because you're going to want it to come the other way. You know, you trade a story for a story. I've done it before, continue to do it. People talk and people gossip. It's easier than ever to get this information, but it's harder and harder to be able to make it seem like you know what you're talking about than ever before, because there's so much out there. I mean, how many Twitter followers out there making a case right now for that Cody Rhodes leaving is a work, because they want to believe it that way. And the more people talk about it, the more they're going to try to buy into it. It's not. So it's the medium's change, and the ability to sift through the bullshit has changed as well.
What is a typical day for you like? I mean, obviously you got the Observer, ad-free shows. So kind of walk me through, you know, you wake up, you have your cup of coffee. What does your day look like, and how crazy is it until the time you sign off at the end of the night and say, you know what, I don't even want to look at wrestling anymore?
So I'm a sales manager at a car dealership as well. So my day is chaos from the word go. There are times that I get to do research for Conrad and ad-free shows while I'm at work, depending upon how busy and how slow it is, or just sometimes I need to disconnect and ignore my staff and just clear out my brain with 20 years ago what happened in the WWE so I don't kill anybody. I mostly do my work at night after the kids are asleep and, you know, sitting in bed and relaxing. There is an expansion of stuff. So Thursday night is when the Observer is proofread and done. So I will get tidbits and pieces of it throughout the week. I'll get my first draft around 5 o'clock Eastern time. And from that point forward, it's, you know, 5-6 hours of proofreading, sending back, and proofreading and sending back. I think my wife would disagree with me. I don't think it takes up that much of my life, but she has let me know that it does take up. I would say I spend about 8 to 9 hours a week doing research for ad-free, and 4 to 5 hours every Thursday night doing the Observer.
Wow. Unbelievable. That is, I mean, it's a big commitment. It's a big commitment.
Sure.
What keeps you going? What is the one thing that is it days like today or yesterday when big news stories hit that just kind of gets the blood pumping? Or is it one of those things where it's like, you know what, every day is exciting for me to continue doing this?
Every day is exciting. Yesterday was different with all the news coming all at once about various companies. Um, Listen, I started doing this with Conrad through the pandemic, and it was a revenue source why I wasn't really sure what my main job was going to be at that point in time, and it's grown. So it's hard to be like, all right, well, I got myself through the pandemic. I'm good. Enjoy whatever else you want to get done at that point in time. Um, he hired me and paid me during the pandemic when I was not making what I normally make. So my role has expanded and continues to expand with them as they have more shows, more content. So I'm going to be right there with them because at the end of the day, they were there at a very low point when it comes to income. It's enjoyable. I don't really watch wrestling. Like as crazy as that is, I'll occasionally pop on Dynamite or occasionally pop on Raw. I don't watch SmackDown on Fridays. I don't watch Rampage. Look, I'll scroll on Twitter and see the clips, and I watch Botchamania as much as possible because it's enjoyable and it's entertaining. I don't have time to actually watch what is going on. I have friends in both companies. Some of them will reach out to me and tell me I should watch this or make sure you tune in tonight or you don't want to miss this. Sometimes I go out of my way to do it. Sometimes I don't. When it comes time to watch it, I try to disconnect from it because one, it's not really in my purview right now for Conrad or for Adfree because we do so much history. And the other end of it is I've watched enough wrestling for what I feel like is 5 or 6 lifetimes, and I'm good in the 1 2 minute to 2.5 minute doses. I watched CM Punk's debut on AEW because I knew it was going to be an event. I watched the Royal Rumble because I watch it every year. I don't know if I'm going to watch 2 nights of WrestleMania, depending upon what is on the card. Working with Kevin very early on in his career and being a part of that and bringing him in to CZW, if it is Steen and Austin, I'm like 99% sure it's going to be. I will do my best to watch it. Mania every year is right around my birthday, so it makes it hard for me to explain to my wife why we're not celebrating my birthday when a professional wrestling show is on. So as much as that adds to our income, there needs to be a separation sometimes of life and state. So it's yesterday's fun because there's so much going on, and you hear something and then you ask a question and then the answer you're expecting isn't the answer you get, and then you ask somebody else a question and then it's like, yeah, by the way, this, and then all of a sudden it just kind of unravels. And that's, to me, the news part is more fun than what actually happens in the ring anymore. But I'm not going to sit there and act like I go out of my way to watch it anymore.
So when it comes to news and free agency and all of this kind of stuff, do you feel like in some ways now it has become just as popular as you made a reference earlier, like the NFL before the season starts? Who's going where, what's happening here? I've made a big comparison to that with just the fact that there's always this burning interest to find out stuff about people that you've wanted to know. Where are they going to land? What's their contract going to look like? What's going to happen? And I love the Adam Schefter reference to this. Do you think there's just this big thirst of people wanting to know more than they previously had a chance to know?
Yes. I don't think there's any doubt to that. I mean, there's Showbiz Daily, or I may have that wrong. I mean, you look at Brandon Thurston's coverage of business and the way he gets fully deep into financial statements. There's a market for everything. There's a reason why ESPN writes a major story today about how it was the most watched Super Bowl in 5 years. People want to feel like they're part of something, and they want to know what's going on. I know it's entertainment. I know no one really cares about what contracts are. It's bullshit. The instant NFL player signs the next mega contract, it's all that's talked about, and it's all everyone comments on and social media. It's no different than professional wrestling. That's where I think the sports and entertainment line gets blurry sometimes. No one really cares about who makes what on what TV show. No one really does, because they don't. What does it matter at the end of the day? But if someone holds out on a contract and someone gets taken out of a show, people want to know why they were taken off. Why are they leaving the show? Is it a money dispute? People inherently like drama, and they inherently like gossip, and they want to know everything that's going on. And the people that say that they don't want it more than anybody else, because they're the ones crowing about how you should just watch a show and enjoy the show. You don't sign up on Twitter for not having discourse. You don't sign up for social media without wanting to be involved in a conversation. And if the conversation is going to be a dissection of the match, and he missed this spot and that spot, or it's, well, WWE got 1.32 in the demo last week. Why does that matter? It matters because you're commenting on it. And I think if you look at the way news and entertainment has been structured over the last 20, 25 years, who was the biggest reporter in the NFL 25 years ago? Can't tell you, because it didn't matter, because they were all local. You didn't have a national NFL guy like you have Schefter and Morrison now. That's what Dave is. And at the end of the day, their opinion matters. When Adam Schefter says something, the world stops. When Adam Schefter reported that Tom Brady was retiring and Tom Brady came out 4 hours later and said, nope, haven't made a decision yet, bullshit. Adam Schefter doesn't go with that story unless he knows it. Dave's not going to put out that Cody Rhodes is leaving AEW without him knowing it. And Dave's going to take 3 or 4 or 5 sources, just like Schefter's going to take. So it's not that this guy said this backstage and that was the feeling. It's, I'm going to get my shit together and make sure I know what I'm doing before I put my foot out in the water. There was a big controversy when Canyon Seaman was supposedly released. That rumor went through professional wrestling quicker than any rumor I had seen in probably a good solid year. AEW getting started was a gigantic rumor for 3 months. No one ever got the confirmation that it was starting because the players involved didn't want to say anything. But everyone knew it was coming. Jim Ross is getting lined up. Chris Jericho isn't signed with anybody. It just made sense. If you follow pieces sometimes, you'll get the answer you're looking for. But until you get confirmation, you don't want to step out and say, by the way, there's a new company forming and they're going to have a show on TNT probably in 8 months, but I'm not really entirely sure of it. No one wants to hear that. So you have to have some type of reality-based thought process, and you got to make sure you're right before you break a big story like that. Kevin Steen twists his ankle, and he has to sit out a Raw, and everyone assumes it's COVID. And then all of a sudden somebody says, yeah, it was just an ankle sprain. There's inherently doubt because they want something deeper and more, and it's got to be this big conspiracy. Everything's a conspiracy. And that's just the world we live in now. And it makes it harder and harder to disseminate what is true and factual, and then what's rumor and gossip. I know rumor and innuendo is a big thing in the Conrad world, and it's pretty funny to hear it sometimes, but there are numerous times I've heard conversations that are true and are factual and don't get printed. Because sometimes you don't need 1 or 2 or 3 sources. Sometimes it just doesn't need to be said, and it's easy to put 2 dots together.
Let me ask you this. This is a stepping away from the conversation for a second. What's your thoughts on the wrestling landscape right now? I know you said you surprisingly you don't get a chance to watch a ton of it. Where do you think it is right now? Do you think this is the best it's been, would you say, in the last 20 years? Do you feel like the fans have a great plethora of options right now, or do you feel like it's WWE still head and shoulders above everybody else?
I think WWE is head and shoulders above everybody else with reach. I think the pandemic really decimated a lot of independent promotions. It's good to see companies like Game Changer stepping up and stepping out. It's hard to describe what is considered best. Do I think it's best for the boys right now? I think that peak happened 8 months ago when Punk and Danielson signed. I think there's going to be a lot of money that is not being used out on the indies and in AEW because of that. And listen, you can say what you want. Cody leaving is money, and there's no doubt in my mind it's money. WWE being able to sign people to these big contracts and being able to utilize them is great to help pay scale. It's great to help pay the boys more. The boys deserve as much money as humanly possible. They're the ones doing the bumps, going through the injuries, going through the aches, pains, and the road. For fans, I think this is the best time possible for them because there's so much content now than ever before. So many ways to see it between independentwrestling.tv, between Fight, between High Spots, anybody. There's enough wrestling that you can literally turn your computer on at 8 a.m. and turn it off at 10 p.m. and literally go through 14 hours of wrestling, not stop, and still have more to watch the next day. I didn't have that opportunity. I had tapes, and I had to hope that the tapes I was getting were in good condition and had to be able to get them to work. And you weren't going to get ripped off by a guy who sent you an episode of the Golden Girls when you thought it was going to be ECW Hardcore TV from God knows what date. So the ability to have content and the ability to have it accessible and easy for you, there's so many options, whatever you're into, death matches, lucha libre, Japan. I don't think there's a better time to be a fan than right now. Don't know in terms of money and salary if it's going to be the best for the boys.
Who do you like to listen to? I mean, obviously put Conrad aside and ad-free shows and Dave. Is there anybody else that you really enjoy listening to, whether it be somebody who does shoot interviews or anything like that? Is there anybody on the outside, on the peripheral, that you're a fan of?
Always a fan of Sean Oliver. Always a big fan because he makes shoot interviews entertaining. I will sit here and be honest with you. I don't have enough time to listen to anybody really outside of Conrad. It's important that I listen to the shows that I'm doing the research on because there are things I'll pick up on for a future episode that I know is coming down the line. So I really have to listen to those shows. There's more content on adfreeshows.com than I can keep up on, let alone part of my job. So it's really hard to listen to anybody outside of that. I rarely even get to listen to Dave because of the amount of content going on coming from Ad Free Shows. Jeff Jarrett is a tremendous storyteller, but sometimes it takes 30 minutes for him to get to the point, and I got to listen to the whole thing to make sure that I'm not missing a sliver of information that we need to put together for the next podcast that's coming the next month. I'm the one who really puts together the schedule for Conrad, so I have it mapped out to where one show's here, then the next month shows here, and so on and so forth. So it's important for me to have to listen to those shows because if there's a teaser or something that maybe isn't in the Observer or the Torch at that point in time that they know is coming up after the fact, I need to be able to circle back to it and make sure that it's covered, because if not, I'm doing a disservice to them and the listener.
It's interesting you mentioned Conrad again. When you do research for him, is it something that you look back in old Observers and you get information there, or what is your policy on how you do research when it comes to preparing a podcast?
Some of it I do off of memory. So depending upon topic, I used to be able to do, the WWF champions in order from 1963 up until, they started changing the titles every week. I have very good memory when it comes to that type of stuff. Being in professional wrestling, I've had a couple of concussions and lost some of that memory. So it's important. I use the Observer. I use the Torch. I have databases on both. I also have a database in MatWatch, which is another newsletter from the 90s. I try to search for shoot interviews so we can provide clips of, Conan saying this or Kevin Nash saying this at one point in time to provide a counterpoint. It's important to get a lot. I do research on books. I just recently read Jonathan Snowden's Ken Shamrock book for the Something to Wrestle episode with Bruce, and it's a tremendous resource. I find part of the conversation is what we thought was happening at the time as was reported in the Observer, what has happened since, information that's come out afterwards, what the boys have said in interviews afterwards, and then, JR has a podcast talking about this subject, and then Bruce is going to cover it. Well, here's JR's point of view, what's your point of view? And I think it's important to get all sides of the story sometimes. Sometimes not all that information is accessible and available, and sometimes it's pure fiction bullshit. So it's easy to sift through some of that stuff. I really use Dave's stuff from back then because he was, I don't want to say the Bible, but the gospel at that point in time, because his word really held so much more than anybody else's did. And listen, part of it's entertainment. So being able to pepper Bischoff and pepper Bruce, some of the stuff Dave says, makes for good radio.
No, it definitely does, because I know both of those guys will, whether it's shtick or it's not. They definitely make it entertaining when it comes to references.
I don't know how much is shtick anymore.
So it could probably be pretty close to the chest on how they feel.
I don't think either one of them are working a gimmick at this point in time. I think, do they play some of it up? I'm sure they do, because they both know exactly what they're doing when it comes to that. I don't know that there's a real love loss between all three of them. I think part of that is also entertainment to an nth degree, but I feel like there's some general animosity coming Dave's way on them.
Any idea? I've always been curious about this. What the numbers are for some of the podcasts, especially with ad-free shows. Like, you often hear about downloads and whatnot. Any idea, just ballpark range on what some of these shows do download-wise?
I don't. I'm not involved in the business aspect of the show. I really I use a good barometer of YouTube views to see what, if a show does good on YouTube, I feel like it has a correlation in downloads. But I don't know the numbers. I'm not involved on the business end of that. Thank God. I'm good staying away from that aspect of it. I know there are hot topics that drive. Once again, the correlation is always YouTube for me. There's no India bots searching around to see Dusty Rhodes in the WWF from Bruce Pritchard's point of view. So there has to be a correlation between the amount of views and downloads between the shows. But unfortunately, I don't have access to the business end of it.
So when did you first find out as far as the formation of ad-free shows? Because I know that there was a little bit about, would Conrad ever create his own network? When did you start to hear a buzz about, hey, you know what, this is going to happen?
So I did freelance work for him before ad-free shows. A couple JR episodes when he started with JR, a couple Arn episodes when he started with Arn, a couple of Bischoff episodes when he started with 83 Weeks. He had a regular rotation of guys. I had no idea ad-free shows was starting until I saw it on the internet. So when the formation happened, all I did at that point in time was, hey, how do I sign up so I can listen to the Mike Chioda mailbag? Because I was, being a former referee, big mark for Chioda and wanted to hear his thoughts. And then Conrad was like, are we not including you in this? I'm like, I don't know, but I just want to listen to the podcast. So how do I get access to it? And that was how, honestly, I found out ad-free shows was formed. I don't know how much of a network it is anymore with Podcast Heat and what's going on with that. Once again, I try to stay away from the business and the stuff. Just email me what you want, and as long as the money clears, that's all I really care about at the end of the day.
So, man, there's so many things that you've had yourself involved in as far as wrestling is concerned. I mean, with working with the Wrestling Observer and Dave and your experiences there, and then obviously with Conrad with ad-free shows, it's hard to say probably what is the most enjoyable, because it kind of all melds together, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely all melds together. Enjoyable is... All right, I'll run through it. So each host, I have a different enjoyable thing for each host. When Bruce gets hot, I enjoy it. When he goes off a tangent, that's part of the reason I started being a listener when they first launched a podcast, was to hear Bruce get hot about something. Eric being able to look back at stuff and see his mistakes and what he would do differently. I think that's a great point of view. Bruce doesn't really do that all that often. He'll admit that, we shouldn't have, but what would you do in that situation? I think Eric generally feels, looking back sometimes at certain scenarios and angles and gimmicks and things like that, I could have tweaked this here, I could have tweaked that there, and I think it's a better understanding. Jeff is just Jeff. Jeff will not answer a question, answer a question all at the same time. JR is by far not the most in-depth, but just the amount of knowledge that can come out in one sentence, I think is my favorite part of listening to Jim talk. Kurt is so much fun to prep for because he has just this innate ability to not remember and then suddenly just remember. Kurt is a different perspective because he was in the ring. He wasn't the promoter. He wasn't the booker. He was just, I'm the soldier that goes out there and does each thing. And there were times that he disagreed, and there were times that, freak accidents happen. If you go back and look at WrestleMania 19 podcast with Brock getting hurt, it's a genuine, true reaction. That's my favorite. When Kurt is able to break down his walls and get into what he's actually feeling, that's my favorite part of Kurt. Working with Dave, the best part about working with Dave is just the constant conversation of, hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see that? And I think that's the most fun for me, is helping him see stuff that he may not see. There's only so much you can do during all hours of the day scouring for wrestling news, but when I can send him a clip of something I thought was interesting, or a spot or something, and then all of a sudden he tweets it out, 2 hours later, and he gets 100 retweets and 200 likes and 50 posts about it. I didn't know about this and I didn't see about this. That to me is the rewarding part for that, and also seeing my name in the Observer every week.
I mean, there's, without a shadow of a doubt, the work that you put out each week, the people who subscribe absolutely love it. I know several people who subscribe to the newsletter, and they love it. And the people who subscribe, they're not just people who just kind of subscribe here and there. They're like lifers. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things. It's like a brand,
Yep.
like a Tide or a Pepsi or,
Yep.
Whatever laundry soap your mom used, you use now, because
Yep.
it's so entrenched in everyone's mind as being the place to go
Yep.
for information. What would be the next chronological step in your career, would you say? Is there something that you would like to do in addition? Is there something that you aspire to do even more than this? Any thoughts on that?
Never thought about it, really. Happy and content with what I'm doing. With Dave, I don't think there was anything else. And this is going to sound terrible to say, but I'm not sure what happens to the Observer if Dave ever stops to sign to do it. I don't think there's like a, here's the next guy up. Like, I don't think Brian Alvarez is the guy that's going to take that mantle. When Dave stops doing the Observer, I think the Observer's, that's the end of it. I think there'll be a pass down, passing of the torch or baton moment. In terms of Conrad, it would be fun for me to host a podcast. I don't know if I would ever even have the time to be able to do it. We've talked on ad-free shows about, paneling shows. I don't know if you've seen the new show with John Alba, Up for Debate. We've kicked around those ideas. I don't know if I'm an on-screen guy. I don't know if I'm a radio voice guy. I kind of don't like being out in front, but at the same time, it's hard not to want to be out front.
Sure.
But I'm perfectly content being backstage and behind. So I don't know if there is a progression. I don't know what the next step would be. I don't know if there's even an avenue at that point in time. I can tell you this: I do not want to get back in a professional wrestling ring. I am perfectly fine never refereeing another wrestling match. Announcing, sure, but perfectly content spending the time I spend now. And it sounds shitty to say there's no aspirations, but I don't really know what else is there left to continue to strive for without it making much sense.
Give me an idea of some relationships that you've built with some people that have stemmed from obviously your work with the Observer and Dave and ad-free shows as well. Anybody that has kind of come into your life professionally associated with wrestling that you have really started to make a good bond with?
I mean, Conrad's one of them. It's hard not to bring that up, just because, before the pandemic and when I was looking for, extra income, Dave was the one that said, why don't you reach out to Conrad and see if he needs help with anything? Knowing Conrad was launching shows. It's hard not to put into words the impact he's had just in general. We don't talk wrestling, which I think is what's fun. We just talk, it's a business relationship, and we'll bullshit back and forth about sports, but legitimately it's here's our schedule and here's what we're doing. And from the Observer, I've had people reach out to me and try to feed me information. I'm not going to mention names because it would probably disrupt some companies out there. I think working with Dave has given me like a sounding board for people of wanting to run ideas by before hitting Dave up for ideas, if that makes any sense. Dave has a tremendous amount of clout in this business that I don't think he really gets a lot of credit for. There's a reason why Vince called Dave when the invasion began, or before the invasion began, to pick his brain on it. He's very fucking knowledgeable when it comes to this business. There's a reason why Japan reaches out to him on a regular basis regarding things. There's a reason why people from America reach out to him to try and get a connection to Japan. So he's a player of the highest level. My connections have just been guys I've worked with on the indies and been able to grow and continue friendships and things like that. You know, I've had Eddie Kingston sleep on my couch when we were doing indies way back in the day. And it's great to see Eddie, you know, continue to prosper and want great things. That's kind of the rewarding part of this, but I get a lot more shit when it comes to being involved with the Observer sometimes than the other way, because people think it's just all bullshit. And it's hard sometimes when people try to bring people down for no reason other than just, this is what I feel like doing today. But yeah, it's fun to see the connection now more than ever of Twitter, social media. But yeah, without Conrad and the rest of the, you know, Paul Bromwell and John Alva and a lot of the staff at App Free, you know, it's not a family, so to say. You know, I think that's really corny when people are like, yeah, we're a family. You're not a family. But at the end of the day, to be able to, did you hear this? Did you hear that? Did you hear this? That's fun. And it's a circle. But it's also fun when people from one company picks on the other company and it's like, hey, did you see this shit? That tends to tell you what's going on in the locker room, and that's fun too.
Just from a wrestling fan perspective, let me ask you this question. Between the two big companies, AEW and WWE right now, do you feel like AEW's maybe plateaued at some point in time here? Or do you think that the ceiling, they still have not come close to reaching their potential?
I don't think they've plateaued. I don't know that I agree with their booking of people that can bring eyes to the product quickly. Punk debut was gigantic, but nothing really came of it. And then Danielson debuted, and that was gigantic. And Cole debuted, and that was gigantic. And I think they're having a hard time trying to figure out what they are now. And that's okay. It took Vince, and I know no one really wants to remember this, it took Vince years to go from point A to point B. When he bought out his father, it was, all right, we're going to put the belt on Hogan. And then lightning struck. And then everybody forgets there was a really, 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 really long down period. Jim Crockett Promotions took a long time to get into a quote-unquote national powerhouse, and it took half that time for them to not sink, but get hurt. I think it's way too soon for AEW to say they plateaued. Do they have growth? Yes. 100% they have the ability to grow. But if you're saying AEW plateaued, then what is the WWE at this point in time? And how do you measure it? Do you do it in TV ratings? Or do TV ratings not matter because the right fees continue to go up? But we don't sell pay-per-views anymore, but house show attendance has been quickly dipping. What's the answer? I think it's way too soon to put a pin in AEW and say they've maxed out. Do I agree with all their booking decisions? Nope. But at the end of the day, You look at what TNA did, 10 years ago, drawing almost 2 million viewers to their TV show. WWE's not even drawing 2 million viewers to their cable TV show anymore. So what's really plateau? What's the height? Do I think we'll ever get back to the WWF WCW wars? Probably not. There's too much selection, too many channels, too much way to get your content. I don't think we'll have a wrestling war where there's 11 million people watching a professional wrestling show at the same time on the same night anymore. I think that has come and gone, but I think the medium's changed. I don't think, people always talk about one of the highest rated TV shows is MASH. You think you're going to get 90 million people to watch the end of a sitcom anymore? What was the last one that did something like that? Seinfeld.
Seinfeld,
right. So is the TV medium plateaued? Are TV shows worse than they were 15 years ago? Probably not. I think they're probably better than they've ever been before. But how do you correlate that? Is that the correlation? If the correlation is money, then WWE continues to grow and will continue to grow with their rights fees. AEW is going to continue to grow because they're going to get a nice fat contract at their next one and possibly have more bidders than ever before because their content is, people want that demo. That demo is not bullshit. It's a real demo. When I do advertising on my dealership, I'm looking for that demo. I want 18 to 49. I want car buyers in that, making 100 to 200,000 hours a year. That's the demo. And it's not bullshit. And it's not a marketing ploy by Dave to promote AEW. That's the demo. I want that demo in all my marketing tools. So if that's the correlation and that's what we're judging people off of, I think it's too soon for that.
Kind of on a different note here, what do you like to do as far as free time? I mean, when you do free time, I know you mentioned, your wife had mentioned, hey, we need to make sure this doesn't, bleed too much into personal life and family time. And I've definitely been on the other end of that conversation as well. But what do you like to do? I mean, take wrestling and put it aside. You're a family man as well, and you got a day job. And so what are you doing when you're just having fun with the family?
Love taking the kids out. When it's one-on-one time with the wife, it's restaurants and hotels and things like that. Just get away. Working a sales and retail job for 48 hours a week can be very mentally taxing. And then you add on, the Observer and ad free shows and all that. I consider those like my downtime, but I want to get the kids out of the house as much as possible. And, I live in the Northeast, so the weather right now is not great to be able to do that. But when it's nice out, I love going to sporting events, baseball, football, hockey, basketball, taking the kids as much as possible. I enjoy going on vacations as my wife stares at me and is like, it would be nice to go on one again as well. Besides that, free time's limited, but I'm okay with that. I get very antsy, so I need something to do. And if I'm not doing something, it kind of drives me insane.
Well, I will say this, wives and girlfriends are the unsung heroes with everyone who is involved in some fashion or form in wrestling, whether it's podcasting or reporting, the biggest outlet there is, whatever it may be. They are very gracious and allowing, us to enjoy what we do as well. And I think that's a big part of a relationship.
Absolutely. And the fact that it's over sports entertainment silliness is just more power to them. But, I'm sure when this is over with, I'll be watching Bravo probably because we need to catch up on the Housewives and Summer House. So we all have our likes and wants and, forms of entertainment. So it all correlates together.
It has been so much fun just getting a chance to talk to you and hear you speak so intelligently on the topics of wrestling and your relationship with Conrad and Dave Meltzer and your opinions on wrestling. Everything you say is very crafted well and thought out and very articulate. And I love having conversations like this. Is there any chance that we may be able to twist your arm and have another conversation down the road?
Absolutely. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Tell everybody where they can follow you, all your information. If they'd like to go ahead and reach out to you as well, the floor is yours.
My Twitter account is at Derek Sabato, DEREK SABATO. My DMs are open. Feel free to tweet me. I have nothing to promote other than adfreeshows.com. there's no better value in wrestling, so take advantage of it. I think you'll like some of the stuff we got coming up down the road too, content and live events and things like that. So take full advantage of it. And I know adfreetrial.com, for anyone who is not sure they want to sign up, I would definitely do that. Utilize it, and you'll find yourself probably in my boat with too much content and not sure what to do with it. And you can't ask for anything more when you're paying for a service.
I love it. Derek, thank you so much for your time.
Appreciate it,
Guys,
Mike.
continue to follow him on social media, adfreeshows.com. Please, by all means, support them. Support Dave and everything at Wrestling Observer and everything that, Derek, you have done for so many years helping him out. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
You got it. Take care. All right, guys, there we go. I've had so many people ask me, hey, are you ever going to talk to anybody from, a major publication? And the very first one that came to mind was the Wrestling Observer. And Derek and I started chatting back and forth. And I said, hey, I think it would be great to have you on the program. And he is such an intelligent person. I'm not saying that to blow wind up his skirt or anything like that. Literally, it's an old man phrase, but it's true. And it's neat to be able to have those conversations with people and to pick their brain and find out, how did they get involved in different things? I know people have asked me, how did you get involved doing podcasts? And I'll always tell them, it's the squeaky wheel, gets the grease, and working with Dave Penzer. And then after Dave Penzer, working with Mikey and Jerry, and then obviously spinning off into this as well. So if you want to be involved, absolutely, there's an opportunity. There's a platform for you. But I think Derek is the perfect example of, if you're interested, if you want to be involved, step up, step out, and let your voice be heard, and let people know that you definitely want to be involved. And he was grinding since 15, guys. And that's the big thing that I've noticed with all the people that we talk to. They're all grinders. They all work really hard. They put themselves and they immerse themselves 100% in what they do every single day. But what I'd love to hear with Derek is the fact that he's able to separate, the wrestling life from the personal life as well. Give kudos to the spouse and just how much he loves being with his kids. I think when you really start to follow someone, or you really start to gravitate towards someone, it's all about who they are as a person, their character. There have been so many conversations I've had with Jerry and Mikey that go way beyond what they've ever done on TV. Just as human beings, as men, as husbands, as fathers. It's just really cool. And it's neat to see he has such a good relationship with Conrad. Conrad has treated me very well in the past as well. So got nothing but respect for everybody involved. Wow, I am really long-winded tonight. But once again, go ahead and continue to follow Derek on social media. And with that being said, don't go anywhere, because we have so much more. The panel is coming up. Our friends from Canada are going to be here. We got the hotline that'll be open. I'm sure ECW fan is going to have something to say. We're going to talk about all the headlines that are happening in wrestling right now. Once again, we will be taking your calls and hearing what you have to say. Don't go anywhere. It is Front Room Material. It's Tuesday night. We'll see you in a few.